It was World War II, and on the 2nd of January 1941, Cardiff was bombed by the Germans. 165 people lost their lives, and I've come to Llandaff Cathedral because it too was bombed. However, the mine that was dropped on it didn't hit the cathedral itself. It landed here in the grounds and caused this huge crater. So I've come here today to have a bit of a tour with the archivist, who's going to show me around and discuss some of the things that happened that day in 1941. So hope you enjoyed this video. I'm here with John Kenyon, the archivist in Llandaff Cathedral, and he's got some, what is it, the leftovers, the remnants of the actual parachute, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. It was a German landmine. The landmine was like a huge long barrel, basically, with a parachute attached to it. And it was part of the bombing raid over Cardiff in January 1941. And the parachute snagged on the spire of the Pritchard Tower at the southwest corner of the cathedral, and then tore itself away and landed amongst the graveyard and exploded there, bringing down much of the roof of the cathedral and its south aisle. And what we've got here on the table are the remains of the parachute itself, and then part of the parachute cord. I imagine the rest of it was taken as souvenirs or whatever, or wasn't destroyed in the explosion, but we managed to or somebody post-1941 managed to salvage part of it, and it's been up in the cathedral archive in the room above us ever since then. And people's records of what happened on that night in Llandaff and elsewhere were recorded a few years ago by the Llandaff Society. And this is just a view of the front cover, shows part of the damage to the cathedral. And this is people's recollections of that night, January the 2nd, 1941. And the cathedral was the most bombed cathedral in the UK, apart from Coventry, which was totally destroyed. Llandaff was the second most damaged cathedral in the Second World War.
You're saying about the locals have their stories. I was actually contacted by somebody she said her grandparents lived on, is it St Michael's Road?
Yes.
And that's like half a mile away. They said all the windows were blown out.
Yes, yeah.
So I was looking on Google Maps to see exactly. So it was quite, because you might think like a mine is just a smallish sort of explosion. But the damage it caused, you could see what it did to the building, isn't it?
And there was various random drops elsewhere. There's a house, I think, at the top of Pensicely Road, which is nearer where we live, further along Fairwater Road, which had to be evacuated because another landmine or bomb landed there. No casualty, but they later exploded, and the house there was destroyed. And further down into Cardiff, Canton area, there was greater loss of life. I think it's people sheltering the cellar of a bakery that had a direct hit. John Humphreys did a good programme, the broadcaster did a good programme on the Cardiff and Swansea bombing on BBC Two a few years ago. Sure.
Actually, one of the story was that the same person who said her grandparents lived over there had an aunt and uncle who lived also nearby, and he was like a wood turner. And he managed to actually get some of the remnants of the wood from the pews and what have you. And he just made a simple little plate, like a little bowl, and he gave it to that lady's parents when they got married in 1944. I think it's amazing that these are still here. That you've looked after these and kept these original. Okay, they did all this damage, but it's still amazing to think. These are the original leftovers from that particular night.
Yes, We're just going on the south side of the cathedral, and we're just heading towards the Garden of Remembrance, where ashes are now interred, but it's the site of where the landmine exploded, destroying that part of the graveyard, sending gravestones and grave contents over much of Llandaff. And then we'll have a look at one of the tombstones which got moved by the blast. So the landmine landed in this area here, this sort of semicircular area, and bringing down the roof behind us of the cathedral. And the tomb, which I'm going to show you in a minute, must have been somewhere on the upper part of the slope, because it landed in the bathroom of one of the cottages on the green there, White House Cottage I think it was, by the force of the explosion. And outside one of those buildings, there's a little pink marble plaque, marble bit of stone from the tomb with a plaque on it commemorating the event. But the actual tombstone itself, damaged, is round the corner to my left. So where the landmine landed was in this area here, but originally it got snagged on the top of the Pritchard Tower, this Victorian tower here, and it dislodged part of the spire. It was leaning out a bit before then plummeting down to the ground, landing in the graveyard here, exploding and causing massive disturbance, to the graveyard here, and then to my right to the cathedral roof, etc., causing extensive damage.
Isn't it right at the time there were people in the building?
Well, the Dean and the Verger were in the building. They were the only two there. So badly shaken up, obviously, with the destruction around them, but fortunately not permanently injured or killed there. So a lucky escape for them.
Yeah, because you can imagine everything
debris
was blown
just everywhere.
out, you
Yes,
know?
yeah. I mean, what's remarkable, there's pictures showing the damage from inside looking out, and the pillar behind us here, the Conybeare Memorial, seemed to remain intact. Somehow the blast must have enveloped it and left it standing, in spite of all the bombing destruction of the roof here. The Conybeare Memorial seems to have remained intact. So we'll look at one of the gravestones, which I was reading. One of my predecessors, archivist Neville James, gave a talk to the Friends of Llandaff Cathedral in 1988 or so, and they were talking about the graveyards and recording names, etc. And they mentioned this one, which I'd never really twigged. And it's this pink marble one here, which you can see is badly battered. And this here, it's not in its original position. It's an Ashburner family, George Ashburn, and originally it was somewhere at the top end of what is now the Garden of Remembrance, and got blown up by the explosion and landed in the bathroom of one of the cottages, which we can see behind me there. So after the destruction, at the end of the Second World War, 1945, plans were afoot even before 1945 to restore the cathedral. And cathedral architect Nicholson died in 1945, and George Pace was appointed to oversee the restoration of the cathedral. So we had to totally re-roof what is above me, wood coming from the East Indies area, Asia, and then certain windows put back, which had been taken out for safekeeping. But the major transformation was this pulpitum. And if you go to some of the great English cathedrals, or St David's in West Wales, the pulpitum is a screen with doorways which divides the nave, where I'm standing, from the choir and beyond. But Pace wanted everything open. He wanted you to come through the west door and be looking through to the great east window of the Lady Chapel. So the pulpitum is this open arch, and so we've got this great figure of Christ welcoming you into the cathedral. And Pace wanted as much light as possible, so where windows had been blown out and couldn't be salvaged, he wanted plain glass. He added the Welsh regimental chapel, and then new chapter stalls, and some of the darker wood we can see up there is salvaged from the Victorian chapter stalls, new pulpit, and a lot of the memorials around the wall were removed by Pace. And then there was the great rehallowing of the nave in 1957, I think, and then a Thanksgiving service attended by the Queen and Prince Philip in 1960, Thanksgiving for the restoration of the cathedral. And of course, works still continue. We have a cathedral architect keeping an eye on the fabric, and work continues like in any great building. There's always some material work to be done.